back in the 18th century, in pretty much all the armies, the British Army, the French Army, the American Army, music is used to signal. In camp in particular is very important. It acts sort of as a PA system. It lets everybody know what's going on. There are certain beats that tell you when to get up, when to eat, when to go to bed, when to gather firewood, when to get water. All those things are regulated by the sound of the drum and the fifes, because that sound will carry very well in camp. So we're going to go ahead and use the drum a little bit to do some of the simple maneuvers that soldiers are going to use. Now you'll notice too that we're wearing the opposite colors. This is not a British coat. This is a musician's coat, and we wear the opposite of what they're wearing. If they were wearing New England coats that had white trim, I'd be wearing a white coat with blue trim. So it's going to be the opposite of what the soldiers that are carrying weapons are going to carry. All right. To the right face would be. Now, two taps like that, a tap and a flam, so basically two beats is to the right. Probably to go to the left is going to be 3. So let's try that. To the left face. All right. Now, if 3 beats is to the left face, to the right about face would be 4. Right about face. And then we'll come back again. The drums and the fifes can also be very useful when you're on a long march. It can be kind of boring when you're on a really, really long walk, and a little bit of music can help. Just like people today, if they go jogging or running, might have their music and with their earbuds. So a very simple one that was pretty common was the long march. I'll just play a little bit of it. Now, if we're going to march forward, we want to move together, so we want to use those signals to help do that same thing. So I'm going to play the long march, and we'll kind of do it like musical chairs. When the drum stops, they'll stop. Usually there's some type of signal to help with that, but we're going to keep it pretty simple today. All right, now to turn them around, we're going to do that right about face. Remember, that's 4 beats. And then we'll bring them back. Now you'll notice I'm not a young kid. Yeah, often you will hear about how the little drummer boys are taking care of this very important job. There are going to be some young kids who might be working especially with their dads who are musicians, learning how to do the job of a musician. But generally, most of the musicians in the armies were young men, just like the rest of the soldiers were. If you think about it, if you're on a long march and you've got to carry this, a little kid is not going to be able to do that very effectively. So usually they're going to be young men, but you would have some kids training. So there is some basis in that idea that kids are doing it. Another thing to keep in mind is that these musical signals are a really important responsibility. In fact, musicians are going to be paid more than the regular private soldiers are. Added on to those responsibilities, they're also responsible for doing punishment. A very common punishment in the army is to be flogged with a cat of nine tails, a type of whip. And those young men who are the musicians are the ones who have to do the whipping. Also, they're the ones that if someone has to be drummed out of camp, remember there are sometimes women in the camps, and if they break the rules, they can be driven out of camp, and usually they are driven out of camp to the sound of the drum. Now, just like in camp, the drum, of course, being very loud, can be used on the battlefield. However, a thing that's very important to keep in mind is that it's difficult, even as loud as a drum is, to distinguish drum beats from cannon fire and musket fire. So it is used to signal on the battlefield. It's going to be used infrequently because it's very difficult to tell what's going on. So if you hear the drum amid all that gunfire, you know something's going on and you have to respond to it. So you have to listen very carefully. So it can be useful, but still primarily in camp and on the march. Yeah, when you hear the drum, because he would be learning.